A 9-year-old boy stands before a flaming altar. He holds his hand over the fire and swears a blood oath of eternal hatred against the Roman Republic. Look at these harsh, jagged peaks. This is the frozen expanse of the Alps. 20 years after swearing that oath, the boy attempts the impossible, marching an army of 50,000 men and 36 war elephants straight through this lethal environment. This is the architect of that invasion, Hannibal Barca. Notice the detailed elephant carved right into his breastplate. He is a hardened, relentless commander, pushing Rome to the absolute brink of destruction. The crossing was nearly suicidal. Avalanches and freezing temperatures killed half his army before they even saw combat. But by surviving the trek, Hannibal emerged in northern Italy completely undetected, tearing up the Roman playbook and taking total control of the war. He immediately put that surprise to work. At places like the river Trebia and Lake Trasimene, Hannibal lured the legions into massive traps. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers drowned in freezing water or were cut down in the fog. By August of 216 BC, Rome had seen enough. They responded by marching 80,000 men to a place called Cannae, the largest army the Republic had ever put on a battlefield. This tactical map shows what happened next. Heavily outnumbered, Hannibal places his weakest troops in the center. As the massive Roman formation charges, the Carthaginian line deliberately yields, bowing backward into a U-shape and drawing the overly aggressive Romans into a trap. Then the jaws snap shut. The Carthaginian flanks sweep around, completely enclosing the pocket. The Romans are packed so tightly together they cannot even raise their swords. In a single afternoon, up to 70,000 men are slaughtered. Cannae was an apocalyptic event. The standing army was effectively erased, and massive Roman allies began defecting to Carthage. It leaves a terrifying question. How does a society survive when its military is annihilated by a tactical genius? Most nations would surrender immediately. Rome refused to even open negotiations. Instead, they took desperate measures, emptying their prisons, freeing enslaved people, and handing weapons to teenagers to rebuild their depleted legions. They realized they couldn't beat Hannibal in a pitched battle, so they adopted the Fabian strategy. They completely avoided direct combat, choosing instead to shadow Hannibal's army, burning crops, cutting off supply lines, and using starvation to grind him down. Eventually, a commander emerged who understood how to actually end the threat. This is the stoic marble bust of Scipio Africanus. He recognized that the only way to defeat Carthage was to adopt their own aggressive tactics. Scipio bypassed Italy entirely and launched a direct invasion of Africa. At the Battle of Zama, he turned Hannibal's own flanking maneuvers against him. The supposedly invincible Carthaginian army was finally broken. But surviving wasn't enough to cure Rome's trauma. The fear of another Hannibal mutated into a calculated obsession with absolute erasure. This is the severe face of Cato the Elder, a Roman senator who ended every speech by demanding the total destruction of Carthage. In 146 BC, Rome executed that vision. These desolate stone ruins looking out over the sea are all that remain. Rome burned the city to the ground, sold the surviving population into slavery, and literally wiped the civilization off the map. With Carthage gone, Rome stood as the unchallenged master of the Mediterranean, commanding a hyper-militarized society built entirely for conquest. But what happens to a machine designed for total war when it runs out of monsters to fight? Look at this dense pile of silver denarii. Global conquest brought an avalanche of foreign wealth and millions of enslaved captives pouring into the capital. But all that treasure was entirely captured by the ruling elite. This map shows the traditional Italian countryside, broken into hundreds of small family plots. While the citizen soldiers spent decades bleeding to save the Republic, wealthy aristocrats seized their abandoned land. Notice how those family plots are swallowed up, consolidating into massive, monolithic super estates. These industrialized plantations were worked by newly conquered slaves, leaving the returning veterans utterly displaced and starving in the streets of Rome. This statue depicts Cornelia sitting with her two sons, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Seeing the collapse of the middle class, the Gracchi attempted to pass radical land reforms, aiming to redistribute the aristocratic wealth back to the starving citizens. These imposing brick ruins are the Roman Senate building. The senators inside, having spent generations mastering the art of total destruction abroad, applied those same methods at home. To protect their sprawling mega-estates, they orchestrated the outright murder of the Gracchi brothers. Centuries of democratic consensus shattered in an instant. For the first time in the Republic's history, domestic political disputes were settled with blades and bloodshed right on the streets of the capital. Rome proved it had the unnatural resilience to survive a military genius like Hannibal, but they survived their greatest enemy only to be slowly dismantled by the toxic inequality of their own success. The age of compromise was dead, making way for the warlords.